of the mitigating measures. You know, a few months ago, I think the president even addressed the nation on steps, you know, that have been taken to mitigate, you know, this hardship. But I think between the pronouncements and the delivery of those promises, I think there has been a lag, which I think we should find a way, you know, to make shorter, so that when we are undertaking this kind of reforms, whatever the social consequences is, we respond very quickly to those consequences. The fact is that those reforms were inevitable. You know, there are things that we needed to do because the economy was almost on the brink. You know, and to pull the economy back from the brink, those reforms needed to be taken. But I take your point that typically, as we progress with this kind of reform, we need to review it from time to time in the light of the outcomes and the light of the severity of the impact. Because we are dealing with economic management. Economic management is not like physics or engineering that you can predict with accuracy. You know, you are dealing with human beings. That is why it is social science. And from time to time, depending on how things are unfolding, I think there's a need to review some of those reforms as we progress. For instance, two major reforms actually we had at the onset of this administration. We had the fuel subsidy removal, and we had the exchange rate unification. The fuel subsidy removal, yes, there have been some efforts to support the domestic refining of petroleum products, and some progress has been made. But again, there was also this promise to do something about CNG, alternative transportation systems, and so on and so forth. I expected much faster response, you know, on that front. And in addition to that, I have thought that we will have some policy measures that will make the process a lot more inclusive, such that it will be cheaper for citizens to embrace these alternative sources of energy. For instance, the cost of, you know, moving from petrol to this CNG, the cost of fixing of all these gadgets and so on, those costs need to be much lower. And we can deploy fiscal policy measures like import duty, like tariff and all of that, to crash the cost of conversion, either of trucks. I mean, see what the truck drivers are complaining about. Many of them are still being powered by diesel, and diesel is extremely expensive now. So imagine if they had been able to easily convert to CNG. CNG is possibly maybe 20–30% of the cost of diesel. That should have brought down the cost. Right. The same thing even with individuals. Many people by now will have preferred to have converted, but we need a policy intervention to crash the cost of conversion. All right. You know, these are some of the things I think we need to fine-tune in the process of... Great.
So, Dr. Yusuf, let me put you on hold while I bring in Chief Akisiju into this conversation. What exactly are we not doing right? I mean, the president in the last 8 months has been on track trying to fix the economy, fighting insecurity, attracting foreign direct investment, and consolidating Nigeria's foreign policy affairs on the world stage. I mean, in the face of this, we're grappling with an alarming surge in the cost of living. On the other hand as well, President Tinubu has said he will not approve the importation of food. Neither will he establish a price control board. What short-term measures can bring us out of this quagmire?
I think the first thing is also to commend the president for taking that position, because it's a natural inclination of all leaders to try to play to the gallery by taking the shorter, easier costs. If that is talking about importation, the option of importing food to ameliorate or mitigate the obvious food shortages and high price of food items. Now, the normal intervention advice would be within a certain period of time that an expected volume of food items will be imported into the country, to create a softer supply environment, as it were. But the president clearly noted that he wants to keep farmers doing their jobs, in Nigeria. And to a large extent, he also wants to keep our businesses, our jobs in Nigeria, because once we start importing, we are actually moving our jobs into those jurisdictions from which we are importing. We are also denying the Nigerian farmers the opportunity to be economically engaged. And of course, given sometimes somewhat inclement business environments from which even our farmers operate, we can't exactly say that they would compete effectively, with food items from abroad. So it is a profound acknowledgement of our limitations indeed, but again, the fact that the president was not rushed, or refused to rush himself into that option, I think is commendable. Now, what are we not doing right? The truth of the matter is, when you introduce or you deploy policies as had been deployed now, in terms of the harmonization of the foreign exchange rates, which Dr. Muda had been a major advocate. I think I was introduced to his position more than 8 years ago, and he had always been an advocate of that position. Even when some of us would even want to rationalize why there was a need to sustain the multiple window options. But again, the reality is that you do not sustain what we're doing. You could not sustain what we're doing, the kind of the policy deployment we had before, in the light of low foreign exchange reserve. If we are going to manage float, they call it, but if we are going to continue to sustain or maintain that policy that policy option, the option is that we'll go bankrupt, and we're near bankruptcy, by May 2023. The federal government has actually started borrowing money, to pay salaries. And when it comes to that, it shows that we are taking loans to pay off, to pay salaries, which is a recurrent aid. And to that extent, we are moving away from what used to be the argument of taking loans to fund capital projects that are productive and that can even pay for themselves, as it were. So the inevitability of the adoption and streaming of those policies were obvious. But again, the fact that we had so much latched on and we are so much for a long time become dependent, on the resources of our, the earnings, from our economy, as it were. It would appear that was a normal condition for us. But indeed, we have been living more or less at virtually a subsidized kind of life, either at the level of education, at the level of our health, access to health service, level of electricity tariff, what we pay for electricity tariff, at the level of our access to foreign exchange, at the level of petroleum. We virtually, as a matter of fact, been dependent on our little earning, and of course that would have to cause a disruption if we're going to go through. If we are going to allow the forces of the market, demand and supply, to determine the pricing, template for us. So I think this is what we are just going through now. It is the first sign, or the first impact or effect, as it were, of a change, in policy. So we had a situation where we thought government was responsible for a certain percentage of our existence. Now the government is saying, no, let us remove that. So that it's not just about us consuming what we earn, the little revenue we earn, but when we make this earning, can we also redirect it into capital projects or projects that would help enable production and productivity in the larger economy, of the country? In such a way that going forward, we would now, of course, be sustained by capacity building, by production and productivity space, the production and productivity threshold that we have built, right, and so on and so on. But essentially, the fact at this moment is that there is a paradigm shift. And because there's a paradigm shift, there is a disruption of our ways of living. But I believe that if we are more committed, if we persevere, we would, of course, harvest the fruit of these policies as they are.
All right, I'll come back to you. Dr. Yusuf, how do you respond to the president not conceding to the idea of a price control board? And also, why do we need to release grains from our strategic reserves? Will this help our situation? 2 questions.
Well, the concept of price control is something that is, I wouldn't say outdated. I don't think, because the matter that was taken to court, the learned senior advocate went to court and got a judgment or so. That was a legislation of maybe the early 70s or mid 70s. We are talking of close to 50 years.
Can work for us.
Things have changed. And when you also are operating in a situation where you don't have full control over the cost or the variables or factors that are driving your cost of production, how do you not dictate the price to the person who is producing? Mm-hmm. Somebody is in production, the person is buying foreign exchange, there's no control over that. The person is buying diesel, there's no control. Cost of transportation, cost of labor, all of these costs. If there is no control over that, how do you now go and control the price of the product? So it's not something that is practicable, So I don't think it's something that can work. When we are dealing with a pricing or inflation crisis, I think one of the biggest issues we should be focusing on is the issue of supply. How do we ensure that we improve supply? In the days of the essential commodities, for those who are old enough, people had to kill and people the soldiers be flogging people and all of that, all sorts of commotion. Sometimes the military people were even breaking into people's shops, accusing them of hoarding and all of that, So those kind of approaches, I don't think it fits into the modern day economic management. What we need to focus on is what are the strategies to improve supply. And talking about strategies, particularly with respect to staple foods, I think it is important for the government to engage the critical stakeholders in that space. Because if you look at the biggest complaints now in town around this cost of living, you'll be talking about staple foods like bread, like noodles, like sugar, cooking oil, cooking gas, rice, grains, and of course, energy products. These are the basic things. And the good thing about the structure of the economy now is that you have major players in that space. If you talk of flour mills, maybe 5 or 3 of them account for close to 80% of the production. We can sit down with them, agree on pragmatic, practical solutions to deal with this problem. If it requires government giving concession to them, in whichever way, to crash the price of flour. If you crash the price of flour, you'll be bringing down the price of bread. You'll be bringing down the price of noodles, spaghetti. All of these things are flour related. If you engage those who are in sugar production, what exactly can we do? Because it's an emergency, whether we like it or not. And when you are in an emergency situation, you have to put all options on the table. To be able to calm the needs of the citizens. What the citizens want to see is affordable food. You know? So engagement with these critical stakeholders, I think, will help. Because you cannot understand the sector better than those who are operating in the sector. I haven't seen that level of sufficient engagement and agreeing on what concessions. If you have to trade off some revenue of government, so be it.
But in the meantime, the federal government is talking about releasing grains from our strategic reserves. That's what I'm asking. Will this help?
No, it will help, but it can't go far. I mean, we are talking. I don't know how much grains they have. We don't have data on the statistics around the grains. And what kind of grains are we talking about? Is it maize? Is it sorghum? Is it rice? What kind of grains? You know, the approach to this kind of problem has to be more fundamental. It has to be more systemic. It has to be something that can trickle down very quickly. Because when you, all this model of distributing things to people, how many people will you distribute things to? It's a huge population. So the approach has to be more systemic and much more fundamental. That's why I was talking about how to tackle this problem from the production end. And whatever concessions we need to give to these critical stakeholders, let us give it to them to bring down this cost. And my colleague, I agree with what he said about importation, and of course the president was not inclined to that. But I think we can move halfway into that. I will give you an example. We have a lot of rice mills in this country. Most of them are operating below 30% capacity. And the whole idea is for them to get rice paddy from local farmers. Local farmers, the reality is that they have serious challenges with production of paddy. You know, security challenge is real. Challenge of logistics and all that, all these things are real. And if you have idle capacity of rice mills, I think in the meantime, we can come up with a framework that will allow the importation of rice paddy, not rice. Rice paddy that will allow for the mills to function, because if you are milling those rice locally, you're also creating jobs. You're not just importing the rice. And these mills are all over the country. They are in Lagos now. We have the biggest rice mill in Africa. They are not doing up to 10% capacity. We have mills in the east. We have mills in the north. So as a temporary measure to calm down this, it is an option we can look at. And we can also work out a framework that will involve the rice farmers and the rice millers in a way that we are not going to hurt anybody. We can give guaranteed prices that whatever you produce, government can guarantee to take it. So that this interim measure will not affect you.
All right.
That guaranteed price, government can give that. So these are measures to deal with this temporary, this situation, which I regard as an emergency.
Absolutely. Now, let me go to Abuja. If you would agree with me, Chief Akisiju, that one of the primary factors contributing to this hardship is the drastic depreciation of the naira. And in addressing this, the CBN took some steps, some foreign exchange market reforms. How optimistic are you about these latest steps?
Well, just like I said, it's when the policy that determines a process change is explained or applied, we should expect some sort of disruptions. One, over perhaps since I'd known the basic alphabets around economy, you know, we in this country we have been, you know, how do I call it? We had been implementing a basic pegging pegging of our exchange rate, and perhaps in the last 16 to not even 16, perhaps in the last 20 years, we also determined what we went into what is called the managed float and all that. Either the peg or the managed, they are cousins of in the same family, and then all of a sudden we have a policy that says, okay, now it's the market forces that would determine it, and that translates to mean that to a large extent the CBN will not be coming to the market as an intervenor, unlike what we used to have in the past, where the CBN at the point in time was a major supplier of forex in the market, into the foreign exchange market. So when you have this kind of policy, it does mean that the processes and, of course, the transactions around the economy would have to change. Because, one, we will now be talking about price discovery. We have not, in the last so many years, more than 40, 50 years, we can't determine the real cost, the real price at which we purchase other currencies, especially the convertible currency, dollar, pounds, euro, and all that. We could not specifically say. And because it was pegged or crawling peg or mandate float, and the important thing was that the CBN was coming to the market, to supply forex, and to that extent, because the forex were not being traded at their real value, it would mean that for every dollar purchased, or for every pounds or euro or yen purchased, the CBN was actually subsidizing that transaction. Now, the paradigm shift here is saying that we are moving away, virtually, away totally from that kind of transaction. So, but again, would it work? That's the question. And I think it will work, depending on the extent of the capacity of the CBN, to manage not just the policy deployments, the ancillary policy deployments to back up the major one, as it were. But I think there's also the need for the willpower by the CBN governor to be able to sanction, because, of course, we have heard how some elements in that space are profiteering, are also manipulating the space, as it were. But I think there should be a monitoring mechanism that the CBN should put in place to know if the system, because an open market forex template is determined or is premised on transparency, and that nobody comes into that space to game that space. So it's an open thing. So therefore, when you have people who want to game it, the CBN should be up and doing in terms of monitoring and, of course, sanctioning such people that are trying to manipulate the market, as it were. So, and again, I believe that the nature of demand for forex in Nigeria has been skewed away from production, which is important. The latest data that we have, that in 10 years, the sum of forex secured by Nigerians, more than 60% of it went into financing health tourism into other countries and paying for school fees, as it were, and of course, basic travel allowances. So we were not actually securing or purchasing foreign exchange for productive activity. The quantum of forex that went into manufacturing was less than 25% of the total total sum. So what that tells you essentially is that we've been playing around with our forex, and forex had not been easy to come by in the country. One, of course, we have very many different reasons for that, but the essential fact is that there's also a need for an attitude change, in the way Nigerians seek out funding in the forex market. I would prefer a preference of a sort, for manufacturers and producers of goods, and goods especially that we produce in country. There are certain machineries, there are certain raw materials that cannot be accessed in country. So those kind of sectors should have preferential access to forex, not for health, not for education, because these are not essential. you have educational institutions in Nigeria that can stand by their own, by themselves, anywhere in the world. You have health institutions. Yes, people complain, but the latest we are hearing is that there's a reverse health tourism traffic from the developed world even to Nigeria now, which talks to the fact that beside our public institutions, and we have many of them that are very good, they are center of excellence, many of our university teaching hospitals, we also have new private health institutions, health clinics that are also very, very up to date in terms of equipment and the personnel, health personnel. So the important thing is for us as Nigerians to also start looking inward into how we can start applying ourselves without spending or securing foreign forex to set our exotic needs, the way I put it. Because when you have to secure so much foreign exchange to travel for education, to travel for tourism, to travel for health and all that, at this critical point in time, what we desire most is that the little fund we are able to raise should go into production and productivity. And yes, some of the policies that we have seen the CBN deployed are having impact. Obviously, when we look at the outcome of such policies, we see the prices still falling. But the basic fundamental thing is that the supply of forex in the market is still not enough. And I think that is what needs to be addressed.
Right. Thank you so much. Gentlemen, let's take a break. And when we come back, we will continue this conversation. Please stay with Politics Tonight, everyone. We'll be right back.
Every major news story is with many perspectives and layered with different levels of impact.
Hello. What time did this happen? We will be right there.
As TVC News, we follow the big and major news, gathering the facts, witnessing the outcome.
I am here live at the aftermath of the approval of the new national minimum wage.
We are TV Station of the Year, not just for breaking news, but for being first, fair and accurate. TVC News, first with breaking news.
Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with us. Tonight we're focused on food pricing and national stability, and I've been speaking with Dr. Muda Yusuf and Mr. Niyi Akinsiju. They are our guests for tonight. Let me come to you, Dr. Yusuf. I mean, do you think or do you believe that this latest steps taken by Yemi Cardoso will help in stabilizing our Naira, our currency? Because some analysts have come on this show to say these steps are just temporary measures. They're just interventionist steps and cannot really do so much.
No, the steps are major shifts in policy direction. So I don't see it as temporary. But what I would say is that it is good to embrace the market approach to solving this kind of problem. And just as my colleague said, I'm a firm believer in market solutions. I'm also a believer in the fact that we need to define the boundaries for the market. Because it depends on what kind of structure you have to support the market. It depends on the level of imperfections you have in the market. Because in economics, that's what you call market failures. Market failures are instances where you discover that the market is not giving you the right outcomes. And when market fails, that is the basis for state intervention in an economy. There are also state imperfection, just as you have market imperfections. But we need to identify those things. Now, just as he said, I'm talking of Chief Akinsiju, we now have a foreign exchange market where those who are importing champagne are importing all these things, are in the same market with people who are importing critical raw materials. We just talk about the cost of food. Basic things that the citizens require, some of which require foreign exchange. All of them are in the same market. And we don't have enough foreign exchange to be able to cater for all these people. So that is why I'm saying that even for the market principles, we need some fundamentals to also support it to deliver. If you are in a system where we have serious challenges with this foreign, then we have to, either through the instrumentality of monetary policy or the instrumentality of fiscal policy, to find a way to prioritize for the critical sectors of this economy, so that the vulnerable segments of the economy will not be feeling the impact of this reform as much as they are feeling it. I mean, we have a market now that just coming, as long as the product is not on import prohibition, just come into the space. That is one. Secondly, it is good to narrow the gap between parallel market and the official one. But we don't have to unify at all costs. Because we have seen very serious volatility in the past few months. The economy cannot bear that kind of volatility, where exchange rate is changing almost every week, even sometimes every day. We need a framework to bring some stability within the limits of the capacity of the CBN to ensure that stability.
So what kind of framework would you suggest?
Well, the framework is to define a band. That's okay, we have examined all these fundamentals. Let us set this thing at this band. So that within our limited capacity to intervene, we make sure that we don't go beyond this band. That will reduce the volatility. That is one. Secondly, the parallel market that we are trying to unify. The parallel market is a highly imperfect market. It's a market where all manner of characters are driving demand for foreign exchange. Not all the money that is chasing foreign exchange in parallel market are clean money. So when you have that kind of market, and we are committed rigidly to unifying with that kind of market, then we can create more problems. You know, I admit that, of course, we should not have this wide gap. We have seen all the atrocities that came with under the previous dispensation. But again, in terms of going for this market option, we should not go to the other extreme of it. Because there is no system that is absolute. And your system or approach to economic management must also reflect the peculiarities and the context in which you are operating. So that is it. Then, thirdly, we have seen some relationship between the depreciation in the currency and this additional revenue that is going to government. Apparently, part of this additional revenue in terms of allocation is filtering into the foreign exchange market. So as an option to stabilize, to check this liquidity, perhaps not all this revenue should be distributed. At least we had that experience in the first time when we had huge revenue. Part of those revenue were kept in reserves for the state government. Nobody is saying that it's not their money. But we cannot afford to be releasing all the monies into the system because of the macroeconomic instability that these things are creating. Right. So we need to think out of the box and reckon with our own reality in managing this situation. The CBN is doing its best within the limitations of the reserves. But as we do that, we need to also look at some ways to modify it. And finally, let me also make this, and it's very important. It is the exchange rate for the computation of import duty or the clearing of cargo. We have too much of volatility in that exchange rate. Almost on daily or, every other day, you have changes in that exchange rate. That is not good for international trade. It's disrupting a lot of trade, a lot of international transactions. Because we have computed, we have made an estimate of what your import duty will be. You have filled your firm, you have gotten all the documents. Sometimes at the point of just clearing the cargo, you hear that the exchange rate has been changed in the portal. So I'm appealing to the CBN to please, in the interest of stabilizing this environment, that window for the computation of import duty, we should peg it at maximum of 1,000. And let's leave it there for 6 to 1 year.
All right. Thank you so much.
Stability.
Thank you, Dr. Yusuf. Chief Akisiji, let me come to you. And this is moving away from CBN and its policies. The government just uncovered 32 smuggling routes. Can we defeat smuggling?
Well, the truth is that smuggling has become an economic tradition in Nigeria, and especially if you look at our situation or our location in the West African sub-region, you will realize that we have honed smuggling by geographical peculiarities. We have more than 17,000 kilometers stretch of borders, and we share with close to eight countries. And these countries are dependent on us, and perhaps even more, I don't know if I should say it's unfortunate, historically, we had actually become the food basket of the West African region, perhaps even up to certain countries on the fringes of North Africa. So it's no surprise that high volume of grains from Nigeria found their ways to places like Sudan and at the edges of Algeria, Tunisia, and all that. So we have a geographical location that is naturally inclined, or that even incentivizes smuggling, as it were, because the major defense against smuggling is to have identified borders that are also managed either at the level of fencing by defined ways, that stop movement. When you get to a certain point, there should be a movement restriction, but we don't have that. So there was a time, I think the authorities, as they were playing with the possibility of having a digital border where they'll have drones and all that, manning the borders. I don't know what extent that had been implemented, but I think there's a need to control our borders. We can see the obvious turnout on the national consumption volume of PMS, for instance, after the removal of fuel. At a point in time, we're doing 66 million liters a day. After the removal of fuel, it came down drastically to about 44 million liters. So, which means that 20 million or something near that liters of fuel had found their ways into our neighboring countries, through smuggling. Definitely not through the formal route. So, the option is to see how we can design and, of course, deploy technology to man our borders, as it were.
All right, thank you. Quickly, we're winding down, but quickly before we go tonight.
Quickly, to comment briefly on what's on this smuggling thing. We have a major issue with currency relativity with our neighboring countries. Practically all of them are using CFA. And CFA to Naira has become very, very strong. 2 years ago, 2 Naira can give you 1 CFA, or 3 Naira can give you 1 CFA. Today, You need over 2,000 naira to get one sefa. So it has become extremely profitable to move our products from here to these neighboring countries. And we are surrounded by all of them. Benin, Togo, Mali, Niger, Cameroon, even up to this part of this northern part of Africa. So it's a major incentive. So, and when we are dealing with a crisis, that is why I like what the Nigeria Customs Service has been doing. You don't allow your food to be getting out of the country, irrespective of whatever protocols you have signed. When we had COVID, did you notice how even countries stopped the export of their pharmaceutical products? Even their food products. Even to friendly countries, they stopped it completely. Because you have to take care of your own citizens first before you begin to think of others. So it's a major challenge for us because the incentive to move the products out, because people are making more money now, exporting products and even food items out of the country to neighboring countries.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Yusuf. Quickly before we go, in less than 1 minute, the Vice President has talked about plans by the federal government to recapitalize and restructure the Bank of Agriculture. How can this bolster Nigeria's agriculture sector? And also, how can we make agriculture attractive to young people? In less than 1 minute, if you can.
No, well, it's about providing intervention funds. Not intervention funds in the way it was practiced under the previous dispensation. Because the real sector of the economy, agric, solid minerals, property sector, manufacturing, cannot survive under the current financing framework of the commercial banks, where interest rate is as high as 25–30%, where the tenure of funds is maximum 1 year. You can't drive economic growth with that. So you need these development banks to be properly capitalized, which is what I think the Vice President is talking about, and also the Bank of Industry and some other banks like that. It is very necessary to bridge the financing gap for the real sector.
Right. Sadly, we have to go, gentlemen. Thank you so much. I'm certain you know it is always a pleasure having you on Politics Tonight. Akesiju, thank you so much for your contribution tonight. Dr. Muda Yusuf, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you very much for watching. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But the conversation continues from here. Get in touch with us on Twitter at TVC News NG and at Olajumoke using the hashtag Politics Tonight. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I am Olajumoke. I'll see you tomorrow.